My mother and my father and my older sister came over from Italy. When he came over, it was the First World War broke out. They drafted him and sent him back to Italy. In the First World War, Italy was a ally. I'm the youngest of 9. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I've been in the company 45 years now. On November the 8th, it'll be 45 years. I was in my 3rd year of law school. I was a internal revenue agent for a year. I was a field agent. My major in it was accounting, and my minor was economics. So I was an internal revenue agent for a year. I then left that to go work in the courthouse for Judge on Common Pleas Court, which is just like your district court here. It's unlimited jurisdiction. Here's all your criminal cases, all the way up to death penalty cases, and it also hears unlimited value cases too, no matter what the amount of money is. So it's just like your district court here that I'm running for. I graduated from law school, and I went to work for the city of Cincinnati in the solicitor's office. One section of that office is the real estate division. I was there for a couple of years, and then I was appointed the head of that division. I had 45 people working for me, appraisers, negotiators, clerks, and attorneys. After I did that for a bit, I then left and went over to the prosecutor's office in that with the city of Cincinnati, and I did that for about a year. And then I was appointed a magistrate in domestic relations, meaning I heard cases as a magistrate. You hear temporary custody orders, division of property, and so I did that for about a year, and then went into private practice. Went into private practice, I ran for municipal court and lost. 3 years after that, the governor appointed me to the Common Pleas Court, which, as I said before, is just like your district court here. I was on the bench for a little less than 2 years. I lost the election and went back to private practice. In 1999, I was asked to come out to be in-house counsel for PurchasePro.com. That's a .com company. Well, we were the 3rd best performer on the NASDAQ, and we came down just as fast when the .com crashed. Then I was in-house counsel for a little company called Next. In my private practice, about 33 years of it was private practice. I did mostly criminal defense work. I handled at least 80 to 100 jury trials. I defended a capital case. He was eligible for the death penalty. As a defense attorney, I handled a capital case. When I was appointed to the bench, I handled a capital case there also. I had one assigned to my courtroom that they reduced, but another one where he waived a jury, and when you waive a jury, you can request a 3-judge panel. I sat on a 3-judge panel on another capital case. And I've been very fortunate. Now, how did I become an attorney? What happened was I was in high school, and it was 1958 I graduated, and so nothing was going on, and a lot of my friends were joining the Army to what they called 6-month wonders. You go in, and then you're on the reserves for about 7 years. I was ready to join, and my brother talked me out of it. He says, "Nah, go to college and go into ROTC to go in as an officer." That's what he had done. Well, I wasn't ready for school, and I did terrible. So I was out, and I was fortunate. I got a job in a warehouse for Procter & Gamble. So I'm working at Procter & Gamble, and I'm walking around saying, now, if I don't get my education, what's the best job here? There was a guy checking in stock on the dock. I went, whoa. So I started night school, and I went through 10 years of night school. And that's 6 of those years I got my undergraduate degree, major in accounting, minor in economics, and then I went to law school. Graduated in 1969 and passed the bar there. So that's my life. Where I grew up was pretty rough neighborhood. Most of my friends at that time growing up there, I really had two groups of friends. The ones I met in school later on, they all turned out pretty good. The ones I grew up with, they all started on drugs. And if you look back in 1958, that's kind of odd because it wasn't that prevalent. But most of my close friends that I grew up with, the man that introduced me to golf when I was 13, he did so much drugs that he lost his mind about 15, 20 years ago. Another very close friend of mine, I represented him in DUIs so many times, it's unbelievable. I know he had 6, and I don't know how many he had in other jurisdictions, so I represented him there. And very late in life, he went and cleaned up because he was ready to die. I couldn't believe how good he looked after just 1 year, and we were like 60 or so. Well, unfortunately, he went back into drinking, and shortly thereafter, he died. So I always thought that marijuana was a gateway drug, and so I was so afraid. I've never taken a puff off a marijuana cigarette, not that I haven't wanted to. So I always thought that was a gateway drug, but I now have come around to think it was a gateway drug because the only way you could get it was you're dealing with people who want to get you on everything else. So I think that what they're doing now is heading in the right direction, you know, especially with the medical marijuana. And if you study the plant marijuana, the uses it has is just unbelievable. It's such a profitable because it can be made into car parts and anything. So making it illegal to grow is just crazy. Okay, so what happened was I came out here and I then this election year I thought, okay, I'll give it one more try. I loved it. I sit as an alternate judge in municipal court, and so I decided to run, and I'm running for Department 20. Now, if you have any questions.
How many judges are running? How many people are running for judge?
Oh, well, there are a lot of judges. There's 60-something courthouse departments just in the district court. Now that's broken down into family court. Then there are some courts that do only civil, some courts that do only criminal, and then there are some courts that do both. Department 20 does both, and that's why it's attractive to me. Why I chose 20, I don't know. I narrowed it down to 3, and I talked to a couple other attorneys, and they told me to go with 20. So there you are.
Your views on what you were speaking on the marijuana doesn't affect your sentencing. Your sentencing until they change the law. Is that correct?
Well, correct. You have to follow the law if you're on the bench.
Right.
But just as we were discussing earlier, I was telling him when I was on the bench in 1985, one of the things that's really interesting is you're always afraid you're going to meet somebody on the street that you sentenced. So I'm walking across the street one time going to lunch, and this guy's coming opposite direction. He went, "Judge Perrino." I went, "Whoa, uh-oh." And so he says, "I want to shake your hand." He shook my hand. He says, "You sent me to alternative drug treatment and not to prison."
So it does affect, you give
well, yeah,
a chance.
It affects you. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I love the alternative courts. You know how much it costs to keep somebody in prison a year?
And there's no positive outcome now.
Right. Do you know what it costs?
Before it was on the board one time, or that was CCDC.
Right. It goes from 40 to 60,000.
Right.
It's crazy what we do. Now, some people have to be incarcerated. Yeah. Here's what you have to do. Here's what I always talk about these judges that say, "Oh, I'm tough on crime." Well, that's a way to escape the toughest part of the job, quite frankly. If you're just going to sentence maximum, here's what you're doing. You're eliminating the decision. and I'm going to tell you a little story. This guy, he had a farm, and this guy comes onto the farm, and he had a lot of work. He had to cut down all these trees. He said, and he knew it was going to take a couple of days. He hires this guy, comes back, and after a few hours, and he's done. He went, my goodness, what a worker. The next day, he had him clean out the things, and he knew that was supposed to take a day and a half. He comes back in 4 hours, and he's done. He went, man, come back tomorrow. Comes back tomorrow, and he had all these apples. He says, see all these apples here? He says, there's 2 baskets here. Put the premium ones in here and the blemished ones here. He says, and it was such an easy job. He says, he'll have this done in a couple hours. He comes back after 4 hours. The guy's got a couple of apples there and a couple of apples here. He goes, what's going on? He says, you did all that work, but what are you doing? He says, how come you only have these 2? He says, it's the decision. That's the point. So when you have somebody, number one, don't sentence them when you're angry. Don't, and they have a technique of asking you, questions that you can't answer. For instance, a speeder. Did you know how fast you were going? Now, answer that question. No. No, you mean to tell me you're operating a 3,000-pound car and you don't know how fast you're going?
Yeah.
Now answer the other way. See my point? So they get themselves stirred up, and that makes it easy because then you want to punish somebody.
Right.
That's all. It's an escape.
So
So what you do is this: if somebody's convicted, number one, you got to look. What does society demand from the punishment? Because society demands that somebody pay a penalty if they've done something. That's number one. Number two, the victims. Take them into consideration. Okay? But number three, then you look to the defendant. What can be done to try to rehabilitate that person? Is that person rehabilitated? Possibility. So then, if you can avoid prison, or at least some of the time, maybe you put them in prison for a short time or so. The least amount of time you can if it's a first offender. And you try to rehabilitate them. You're going to save a lot of money, and you're going to have a constructive citizenry.
Give them a chance.
At the end, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So if I'm understanding, you're running for criminal judge?
No, it's criminal and civil.
District Court.
Department 20. District Court.
Criminal and
See,
civil.
the department delineates what courtroom you're in. That's all it really does. And also what type of cases you're in.
Can you make laws?
Can I make laws?
Can you help change laws?
No. You gotta follow the law. You take your oath, and you have to follow the law. Because I'm sorry.
Can you bend the law?
I think that's a problem to a lot of people bending the law. Well, no. I mean, you have to follow the law, and you have to do it within the law. I mean, that's the same way with juries. You see, with juries, they have to take an oath. If I have 12 people sitting in the box, each one of them is allowed to apply the law as they want it to be, well, that's chaos. Right. So you have the law, they have to swear to abide by the law, and then you work with it. Now, the legislature is the one that changes the law, and you have to deal with that. Now, as you know, there's different interpretations that can become. So the Supreme Court, eventually, I mean, if you're in a courtroom, a lot of judges make a mistake. So you can appeal it. And if you have to, all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, if it's that type of case that can get into the national system. Yes.
I want to know, as a judge, like some judges, they go hard on certain different things. What type of things do you go hard on? Your pet peeves. Like, some judges, they go hard on DUI.
Right. Well, no, you're gonna get harsh treatment if you've really hurt somebody intentionally, and especially if you have a strong record of that. And it's not, one of the people in prison who you know, are the least recidivist. In other words, they're least likely to go and commit the crime again. A lot of them are murderers. You know why? Because it was a passion or crazy response to a situation. Okay? Now, but if you get a murder, if you're someone murders and they've been a robber, they've been this, they've been that, and that's a different story. That's a pattern, and that's a person who has problems and deserves a serious. Now, let's not deal with murders. I mean, you know, I represented a man who was buying drugs, and he was trying to in Cincinnati. We had a real bad neighborhood downtown. It was all black, okay, and there was a white community in northern Kentucky that was buying drugs because they got to know this guy, so you get a whole lot of these kids coming over. My client was a pretty young guy, and he goes over to buy more drugs, and he didn't have any money, so he goes home and gets a gun. Coming back, just trade the guy for some drugs. But the guy says, no, I'm not going out. And this is kind of funny because he says, he was a convict, and he couldn't, if he gets caught with a gun, he knew that he was gone for a long time. So he said, no. But I'll take it and I can sell it. So he goes to a bar and gives it to one of his friends. His friend goes in the bar and goes out the back door and steals the gun. Now he's got to go back to the guy buying drugs. Goes back to telling, and the young kid reaches down, gets a claw hammer, hits him in the head, knocks his eye out, hits him in his finger, knocks his finger off, and he thinks leaves him there, thinks he's dead. They would have never caught this guy. But the man crawls to his home, his mother's house, a couple blocks away, comes back. Now they charge him with felonious assault. Okay? He should have been charged with attempted murder. I'm defending him. They had trouble with the case because the witness was such a bad character. Okay? My guy had no record. They reduced it all the way down. They were only going to give my guy 2 years. I'm going, whoa. I'm going, I can't believe this. He should be looking at attempted murder. So what do? We go to a jury trial because he wouldn't take 2 years. We go to a jury trial. The jury finds him guilty. I'm in my office. A juror's going by. He stops up and asks my secretary, can I talk to Nick Perrino? I said, yeah. He comes back to me and he says, that's the toughest decision I ever had to make. I'm going, whoa, are you kidding me? I'm saying, this guy, you know, but I almost won the case. But, so that's, you know.
How much time did the jury?
Then the judge gave me 9 years. I had a real bad judge. The judge was bad too. I mean, he came out of the prosecutor's office, and he was just so lax on the law. I mean, I had trouble with him.
So he could have got 2 years, but instead he got
if he pled, he could have got 2 years. You know, when he sentenced him, he says, I could have done 2 years on my head.
You don't take the deal, you go to trial, you're going to get the max.
If you lose.
Well, you shouldn't really get the max. That's the point.
Here, but
That's the point. You shouldn't. The judge should still take all those things into consideration. Or else, you see, that's what they do. They threaten you to try to keep you from.
Because they don't want you to take it to trial.
Exactly. One time I went into court and I was going to go to I had a DUI, and this lady, she just got a job driving one of these small buses for the handicapped.
Mm-hmm.
She hadn't had a job for years because she had asthma and everything. Well, she finally got a job, just got it. And she's on the road going around a corner, an S-turn, and she has an asthma attack. She's doing this. When she comes around the corner, she almost head into a police officer. Police officer takes her off to the side. You know, you can't perform those things on the side. So he takes her in, tries to give her a breathalyzer. She can't do it, asthmatic. So they put refusal. That automatically gets her a year suspension, whether she's found guilty or not, because they put refusal. I had to file. There's a piece of paper you have to file on your first appearance. I filed that. That keeps the decision with the court, if you can get to that. So I go into her courtroom and I'm saying, I filed a jury demand. By the way, you can't get a jury demand here. You can't get a jury trial on a DUI here. They can send you, which surprises me. In Cincinnati, I get a jury trial. I had so many jury trials on DUIs. It was crazy. So what happens is we go into the courtroom, and to show you what it's like, the court's trying to get me to the police. She says, I don't have any secretary. She says, you're going to have to prepare the charge. I said, I can do that. She says, I don't have this and this and this. She kept telling me all these things. And then finally she says, well, I just want everybody to know I haven't had a jury trial in over a year and a half. I said, you're not going to be able to say that next week. Because I had 2 jury trials scheduled for her that week. So we go to a jury trial, and the jury comes back not guilty. Now, the judge says, nothing further, dismissed. I said, wait a minute. I said, the jury didn't believe she refused. Judge, you should return her license. She got her license back. So she saved her job.
But if she didn't have an attorney, that wouldn't happen.
No way.
Yeah. How far, as a judge, once you get there, I have every confidence.
Well, I love you, man.
How far does accountability go? Somebody who's willing to own up and fess up. How far does that go with you?
Oh, that's very good. I mean, that's one of the first things. You know, do you take responsibility, and are you? But you still have to see, is the person a good person? Because you'll find a lot of people come in and say that. You still have to look at their background. You still have to look at their record. If they've done 15 harmful things to people, and then that doesn't have much sway. So the record plus taking responsibility, that all comes into play. I'm human. The judge up there is human. So that's what you want to do. All right?
Why do you want to become forward?
That's a good question.
And a tough one.
Yeah. No, it's not tough, quite frankly. It's really a great job, number one. Number two, I'm glad I was there to be there to help people that could be helped. I was the one to make the decision. It brings a lot of credit on you and your family. And it's just, that's my profession. And that's the pinnacle of my fact.
Well, you were an attorney for a number of years. What made you want to make the decision to become a judge after being a criminal defense attorney for what, over?
Because I loved it. I mean, I was in court all the time. I just loved it. I was a prosecutor, defense attorney. I've done, and I was a magistrate, which is a mini judge. So I just loved it.
It became your passion.
I'm sorry?
It became your passion.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, that answered one of my questions, because that was, what was your purpose to serve as a judge? So you answered that one. How long have you practiced law here, both in Nevada, both prosecution and?
No, that was all in Cincinnati.
Oh,
I've done in-house counsel for PurchasePro.com and for Next, and I've also sat as an alternate judge in the municipal court.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
So you've never really, so you haven't defended no one nor prosecuted?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Now, the alternative question I have is, running for a seat in district court, what's your message to the people? I mean, you say civil, you say district. So what is your message? How could you persuade me to vote for you based on the fact that, yeah, I'm a convicted felon, but I have family who I can talk to about, hey,
sure.
I need you to vote, what can I say to them to persuade them to say, hey, this guy I believe will be a good judge? Because you got to understand, I've been through a lot with Nevada district courts, and I've been on the other side, and listening to you, I'm very interested in you because you said some things that draws my interest as far as being a people's judge instead of a judge for his people.
Let me here's the only thing I can present to you. Okay. Number one, I had experience as a prosecutor, defense attorney, and as a sitting judge. Not one complaint to the Cincinnati Bar Association. You have 45 years. Okay? Now, I was just telling I said, I just received this about about a month ago. I knew I had the highest rating. This is Martindale Hubble. They rate attorneys throughout the country. If you get online and go to Martindale Hubble, you can put in an attorney's name and see what their rating is. Okay. Anniversary. Nicholas A. Perrino rated AV preeminent for 20 years, from 1994 to 2014. It says highest possible peer review rating in legal ability and ethical standards. I can't present any more than that.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's why I want to be on the court. Yes.
Okay, this is a dual question.
All right.
Okay, do you ever, at a time where, or in the future, you would say you did, you was sitting judge for municipal court, correct?
I sit as a alternate judge when somebody's sick or so, they call me.
Okay, so now, have you ever at any time felt uncomfortable as far as sentencing somebody? And do you believe that, what's what I'm looking for? I don't want to necessarily say inaccurate, but, your reflection on the person that's coming before you for sentencing could possibly be a miscarriage,
No, I've never really felt that way. But let me tell you, one time I avoided a situation that could have been that. I had a young man. He was like, I don't know if he was 18 years old. So he had LSD drops. All right. Well, back then in '85, you had mandatory sentences. Okay, so he came to my courtroom and pled out. So I was going to have to sentence him to something like 7 years minimum, something like that. So he was done. His life was gone. He was really not a bad kid. He was done. Before sentencing, after taking his plea and before sentencing, what happens is a drug dealer comes in, a case for the drug dealer comes in, and the prosecutor comes in, and the defense counsel comes in and says, we want to reduce this because he's going to help us. So we want his case reduced to probationable offense. This guy had a long record, but because he had somebody to turn in and could help, then they wanted it reduced. Whereas this 18-year-old, he didn't know anybody. He was messing with LSD on his own. Okay, so I'm going, wow. So I called the defense attorney and I called the prosecutor in my room and I said, I'm rejecting that plea and setting it aside for that young man. I said, if you don't make a deal with him where I can save him, send him to some treatment or something, I said, I'm not accepting that plea and I'll recuse myself because I wouldn't be able to keep the case then. If I set it aside and try to force the prosecutor. They come back and they reduced it and let me treat this kid. Now, I would have felt terrible. It's a life gone. So, there you are. Yes.
Earlier you said first-time offender is more likely to get rehabilitation than like a third or fourth-time offender.
No, I don't say that. I'm just saying you don't know the history, so you give them the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully they can be rehabilitated. You might get a mass murderer in about a month. I don't know. But what I'm saying to you is, you have to give people a chance. Where if somebody comes in here 3 or 4 times, because he's been given chances, he hasn't taken them. But I agree with you. We are all, can take advantage of what's presented to us on any particular day. Had I not gone back to night school, I don't know where I'd been. What the heck? So, how do you know? I don't know what your record is. You can turn it around and focus on the right things. And here's the problem with people with records have. Here's their problem. They get turned around, they feel good, and they're in the right direction, and then all of a sudden they get slapped down. You have to be able to take any slap down that comes your way and focus on rehabilitation. And I can make it. Because if you don't, you're gonna be treated harshly with a record. You have to be able to overcome it. Number one. How do you judge people? You judge people by their records. You might say no, but you do. It's automatic.
By your track record?
By their track record, by their history. We all do it.
Yeah, what they did to you before.
Or maybe not too, but one more, sir. Why do you think Nevada is so hard? Just like you said, in Ohio, they have jury trials for DUIs, but not here in Nevada.
You know,
Other states
Yeah,
are
everything.
you know, you have to remember how far Nevada has come in such a short time. You know, it was the Wild West just how long ago? So the judicial system and the legal system is still, you don't even have a court of appeals here yet. And there's 2 million people here in just this valley that the Supreme Court can't handle. You get convicted, I mean, your term might be up by the time the Supreme Court hears it. So, I mean, so it's crazy. They can't, they're not keeping, but that's the fact of life. You don't keep up. And they have to keep up. They have to, things have to be changed. I never could understand that the jury trials for some serious, I mean, municipal court, I can sentence people to a year and make it consecutive. Like, what the heck? and without a jury trial?
That's what they try to do to me in city jail.
I'm sorry?
They try to give me a year consecutive in city jail for DUI.
There you go. See?
Well, cases like that aren't really fought on a United States Supreme level, and that's why it happens.
Well, I'm not so sure. That's one of the things that interests me. I know they're going on this the Constitution here, and I'm sure in some time the Supreme Court had to say, well, that's within our Constitution. I don't know why people haven't taken it to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in fact, I made that comment to somebody because I don't see all the criminal. And another criminal defense attorney said, that's interesting that you say that. He says, but there are a couple of cases that they look like they're going to go to the
At least to the next circuit.
We'll see. Yes.
Okay, how do you consider, say if I was in front of you, or just your view as far as
Just by looking at you, you did a lot of time. No, go ahead.
That's funny not.
contributing factors to why people commit crime? As far as like homelessness or economic hardship, like how do you factor that into your
You know, that's interesting. I think situation does cause a lot of problems. I mean, how, where you're born, but number one, I think, with me, why did I never get involved with any of the drugs or anything that my closest friends were doing was mostly I did not want to disappoint my parents and my family. That was the biggest pressure on me. Now, each of us have different pressures on us, why we're going to respond. One of the things that I would think everyone in this room should be looking at themselves and saying, number one is I'm going to do it for myself. Now, at this stage of my life, I have to do it for myself. Nobody else, you're old enough, you've already done something wrong, and now you got to do it for yourself to rehabilitate yourself. That's it. Yes.
Have your views on how do you think about judges being elected and how
I'm sorry.
Judges being elected and how responsible they are for their constituents?
Yeah.
They only have to respond to some portion of their.
And not only that, there's certain attorneys that give a lot of money to certain judges. There's I prefer my nephew just retired from being a judge up in Vail, Colorado. Now, he was the city attorney, then he became the county attorney, and so they appointed him to the bench. They have what is called, I'm not sure they followed all, but the Missouri plan. And the Missouri plan is you have a committee, and usually they have Democrats and Republicans on this committee, and the business people and different people are appointed. And usually it's a pretty good committee. And they interview people and recommend to the governor who should be appointed. Now, after you're appointed, you're on the bench for, say, 4 years or 6 years. These are 6-year terms. Let's say you're on the bench for 6 years. Then you run against your record. On the ballot, it'll say retained or not retained. And they have a committee follow up on finding out. They interview attorneys that are appeared before you. They interview other judges. And they also interview the Supreme Court to see how your decisions are. That committee recommends whether or not you should be retained or not. And if they recommend for you not to be retained, that's usually a death knell. You know, you're going to lose. Now, I like that system, but is it foolproof? No, because you still have politics involved somewhere. The governor is making the appointment ultimately, so you do have politics involved somewhere. I don't know if you can get politics out of it completely, but that I prefer that plan. I ran, this is my 3rd time running. Everybody I run against are on the bench. All the women. They were all women. They're all on the bench. To give you an example, I spent $12,000 in my primary. There were 4 of us in it on the first race. The judge that won the primary and won the alternate election spent $90,000. Now, I'm in a tough race now. He's going to have over 100,000. So there you are. But you know, that's the fact of life. I just have to go out there and do the best I can. It's not going to kill me if I win or lose. I'll be disappointed, but
well, it's good to know you're not a mover or a shaker with the attorneys here.
What are you talking about? I wish I were. No, pulling your leg.
Yes. You said earlier that attorneys give judges money. I'm not sure what you meant by that.
For their campaigns.
For the campaign.
Yeah, they contribute to their campaigns.
Okay. All right.
Large amounts of money. The casinos, large amounts of money.
Right, that's part of it. I've only been in CCDC upstairs one time, and I was there, and I was sitting next to this guy that was wanted. He was a general contractor for Katrina in Louisiana. He was waiting to get extradited back there. And my question is, he kept saying that he was hearing stories of other inmates, and I heard the story too, that it was the 2nd time that he got caught with a half ounce or a small amount of methamphetamine, and the inmate was stating that I'll probably do 3 years. And this gentleman stated that if you're in Alabama and you get caught with that much meth, you're going to do 15 to 20 years.
Oh, I know.
And my question is, do you think Nevada isn't that hard on it because they don't want to waste the money, or is the South hard on it? Maybe you don't have an answer on that. Or
I don't know why they're that way, but you have to remember there's certain attitudes that are in pockets of the country.
Right.
You know, certain states, look at Texas. They love killing people for their murder. They can't keep up with the sentencings.
Right.
What's the philosophy there? Why is it like that? I don't know. It's just like here. I think it's the Wild West attitude.
Yeah.
You know, the judge is there, and I'm tough, a hanging judge. That's who gets elected. It really is interesting. You know, the judge that says I'm tough on crime and you're going to get the maximum, they get a lot of support until you're before them or your son. It's just like this. If your son did something wrong, man, when you live across the street from me, that your son should be incarcerated to protect me, and he's no good. He'll never be any good.
Yeah,
My son did the same thing. Man, that's out of character.
I
Oh, he's a nice guy. He just did this time. Believe me, give him his chance.
Right.
See the difference? I mean, so we all have our own self-interest.
Right.
And that's what you're doing. Yes.
Yes, sir. You said you were the youngest of 9. Are any of your brothers or sisters in the court system or judges or?
My brother, who just passed away, I was in practice with him for 33 years. And
Okay.
he did mostly criminal defense work also. That was his specialty. He had a capital case where the person was charged and was looking at death penalty and walked out not guilty.
Which is hard to do.
I'll say. Yeah. So he passed away this year. That's the only one. I have a sister in between him, so he was the third from the bottom, and he became an attorney, and I'm sure his influence was great over me.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, I think part of trial, pre-trial disability evidence is one of those important things in a court case. Have you ever run a situation where I think this happens a lot? An officer pulls over a car on the highway, suspected of drugs. The driver says, no, I'm not going to let you search my car. So how do you feel about a situation? Well, the officer calls for a canine unit, bring out a drug-sniffing dog to invent probable cause out of thin air that did not exist. They use a dog to bust open the guy's trunk, and then all of a sudden, well, they may or may not find something. How do you feel about that?
Well, man, you're talking about issues that's your constitutional rights would come to issue there, and how the Supreme Court decides what governs that. Okay, and you have to remember, criminals are great at avoiding prosecution. Okay, well, the police are going to try their best to get you, and if they have to take a dog or whatever, that's what they're going to do. Now it's up to the Supreme Court to decide, and that's kind of an interesting case. Number one, they never used to be able to search your car net, but then they said, okay, you can search wherever they can reach. Yeah, for your own safety. Okay. Then, so it's a shifting model.
So have you ever run into a case where a dog was used to?
Sure. No, I never ran into it in my own, but I've been asked that question, and I know there are cases galore on that issue. Number one, I thought I smoked marijuana, so then I called the dog. Okay, so it's kind of interesting, and they're all kind of technicalities. Pretty soon, I guarantee you, they're going to have something that's going to show. As you drive by, you'll be able to tell what's in your car.
Yeah, that's going to be another issue. In that situation, that's how they find drugs.
I know.
So that's
a lot of those
cases.
When you go to court on a lot of those cases, that gets thrown out. That's legal procedure. That gets
sometimes, but you'll be surprised.
It depends on your lawyer.
You've got an awfully conservative Supreme Court.
Yeah. That also goes to this question.
Wait a minute.
When is election day? Exactly.
Oh. All right, glad you asked. The early voting starts on October the 18th. Okay, and so that'll be in your grocery stores and things like that. Then November the 4th is election day, but they make it convenient for you. You said November the 4th is election day, but October the 18th it'll be in your local grocery store, and they'll print that. You'll see that list all the time. In fact, you're learning how to use a computer if you put it in.
Yeah, you can do it. I have this question. Do you think that statutory law should be consistent with federal law?
Statutory law? It has to. If it violates, well, here. If your federal law covers a particular area, your law has to be no greater than that. It can be lesser. Okay, but it can't be any greater. So, to protect it. In other words, there are constitutional rights. But in order to enforce that, it takes, you got to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And you'll find that law is made because they'll have a public defender. Because a lot of people, you can't afford for your attorney unless you're very wealthy. Now then they'll get there. But it's tough to get your court to the Supreme Court. I mean, your case to the Supreme Court. You have to go through your state system all the way through up to the Supreme Court. You have them decide against you, and then have and in order to get to your Supreme Court, it has to be a case of the magnitude that they feel is important. So sometimes they reject it. Then you have to go to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they'll decide the same thing, possibly. Now, if it's an important matter affecting a lot of people, and there's two different decisions coming up, one this side, one that side, then the Supreme Court might look more favorably about hearing it. But that's a lot of work. So they got to be careful.
How much, in your opinion, if your family doesn't have much money, how much can a public defender do for you compared to a criminal defender?
Oh, no, you're wrong. I'll tell you what. You're a lot of you, especially in Cincinnati, you'd be surprised that the quality of attorneys that take cases, appointments from the public defender's office. Now, public defender staff, it depends on who's the head of it. Because if they're demanding, they'll have top-notch attorneys in there. If they're not, then they get slipshod and they don't care about you. And it's the personality of the guy who's on the top. That's what's important. And if he's out to look at a lady that was in my school, graduated with me, she became the first public defender, because back then you didn't have public defender's offices. The judges would appoint just regular attorneys. And it's interesting. Some top-notch attorneys get appointed to do the big cases or to do cases.
That's pro bono? Is that what they're
No, don't get paid, but not enough. And I always felt that I'd take certain cases from the public defender office. I wouldn't take a whole lot, and I'll tell you why I did that. When you go into court, public defenders, they just by the nature of their job get an attitude like he just showed, that they're not interested in you. And the reason is they say the same thing over and over again, and they're seeing the judge is seeing this person say the same thing over and over again. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I take an appointment and I'm in there a lot for public defending, what about my clients who's paid me $1,500, $2,000 to get in there to represent him? Is the judge going to say, oh, he's saying the same thing? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So I limited what I would take. But most of your murder trials, like the death penalty case, that's an appointment through the public defender's office. Most of them. Okay. Most of them are because no one can afford it. But there are, and you get paid pretty well for that type of case.
Public defending is almost like an internship for attorneys.
Well, no. There's a lot of them in there that are pretty. That's their career. They don't want to get out there, and it doesn't make them any better anyway.
Worry about getting clients and things like that.
Right, and it's kind of tough. A lot of guys I know, and you kind of get angry because of their politics, and they're giving a lot of money to the judge fund, that they're or the prosecutor's office. Because the prosecutor has to run, they're getting a lot of money to the prosecutor's office. And so that's just a fact of life. Certain people are at an advantage. And so a lot of people don't want to put up with that, and they can't survive. You'd be surprised. Everybody thinks attorneys make a whole lot of money. You'd be shocked at what the average income is. You've got the attorneys that make tons of money, but most of them are down here. Most of them, believe me, you get the public defender's office here pays great. It's a good salary. And public defenders used to get a lot less than prosecutors. And so that went up, and there was so much heat saying, wait a minute, I got, you look at the quality you're getting if you're not going to pay. Now they get the same amount as the prosecutor. So you're getting good attorneys, and they can make a career out of it. The thing is, you have to work with the attorney, and quite frankly, the public defender, they get overloaded.
Yeah.
And so if you're the type of person that abuses your own attorney, it's only natural to say, okay, I'm not going to deal with him as much as I am someone who's cooperating and treating me properly.
Let's have one more question.
Director, what was the name of the other judge that came and spoke?
Scotty.
Scotty, are you going to be running against him?
No.
No, it's different. That's different.
He's District 1, he's District 21.
Yes,
I mean, Department 1, Department 2.
I have I have a question. Do you have, I mean, I wish you good luck, the best of
I'm sorry?
I wish you the best luck to.
Oh, well, thank you.
But I do have a question for you. Do you have any agenda or plan you'd like to see achieved before you finished your seat, and that do you bring a change to like the betterment of the law or the betterment of the society in the future?
Okay. Everybody, most people say, do you have an agenda or how are you going to do this? Here's what I bring to court. If I can change using alternative sentencing, I love it. If I can use anybody that would help the court rehabilitate, that's worthwhile. But here's what I bring to the court, I think, and this is where I can have the most effect. Number one, be punctual. Now, what does that mean? That means you don't have a delay in your courtroom because things have to move along, okay? Whether it be a civil case or a criminal case. Justice has to be not super quick, but it has to be timely. That's number one. Number two, keep your docket current. Know your docket. When I took over from a man who was sick for years. Wasn't even showing up at the courtroom. They'd bring 1 or 2 files with. I had a horrendous docket. How did I manage it? I'd have the clerk bring 15 cases or so to me. I read it. And that way, I then set it down for a hearing for them to come in. That way, I'd read it again. And I'd say, okay, we're going to have another status report. I get to know every one of those cases, and it makes them talk to each other to move it along. Okay? And the last thing is respect everyone who comes into your courtroom, no matter who they are. There you are.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, and well, I have my own. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's just.
We'll get that information. Can we have some of these?
Nope. You can have all of them. No, you can't. So if you pass them out to friends and family, I'd appreciate it. If you're for me, if you're not, don't you say anything.
Now, also, we have a tradition that we do. This is a book that we use in the schools that everyone has signed, right?
No.
Oh, okay, almost everyone has signed. And so we're going to pass it. Who hasn't signed it? Just this row. So, and then we're going to give that to you in a picture taken outside. That's all right.
I appreciate that. Thank
you. So, any last questions now while we're waiting for the book to be signed? Yes.
No. Yeah, sure. What the heck? Sure. Oh, well, sure.
Do you know how long you have to wait before you sit in record?
I'm sorry.
Depending if it's a felony, misdemeanor, or
Oh, you mean have it expunged? Yeah, to have it removed. You know what? I don't know their time.
It's 2 years for a misdemeanor, 5 years for a gross misdemeanor, and 7 years for a felony.
Is it expunged or a sealed? Sealed.
And it's just for employment issues. That's all it is.
Well, yeah, you're right. That's big.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's big.
So is that any charge?
2 years for a misdemeanor charge.
5 years for a gross misdemeanor charge and
Yes.
7
Are you
years for
familiar with Judge Kearns?
But it costs $5
Judge Kearns, yes.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
You have to pay me, it's a lot of money.
That's their job. That's right.
I really like that.
Yeah, it costs $5.
He had to run, and I see him all the time. We were out passing materials together. Yeah, he's a terrific judge.
Ask him.
Yes.
I just want at the end of the day, you have to uphold the law, and I see you have a wide range of knowledge in law from civil all the way to criminal law. What are some changes in law in the laws that you would like to see?
I would like, especially in the federal system, okay? For the longest time, they had mandatory sentencing. And what happened was, once you're convicted in the federal system, they'd send you over to the probation department, okay? They then would score how many points you scored. Did he take responsibility? And how many points you scored, the judge had no way to get around that sentencing. It was mandatory. Like it was the probation department sentencing you, not the judge. So now they find out that they don't have enough room in prison. They don't have enough prisons. They can't afford it.
People were stupid.
Now they're changing that. Now, and I like ranges. In other words, okay, if you're going to sentence them 2 to 9, and that way, how they behave later. And I also like this. And they don't do this. I like where a judge can keep control of the case for a certain length of time.
After the conviction.
After the conviction, even after your sentence. Then it possibly bring you back in to hear how you're doing, this and this and this, and then maybe put you on probation. I like that too.
Hell yeah. I like that.
Okay, so we can do this outside, Kim. But before you leave, hold on 1 second. So this is a book that everybody gets, and it's for memorizing.
Oh.
So this is
You're making
most of the things that you read and remembered. So every Friday we have on YouTube.
It was in my pocket.
So this is your copy.
All right.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Oh, I thought you were going to make it recital.
Next time we'll do that. Thank you, California.
You're welcome. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.